The guard who saw what others
my
missed.
God.
The morning light broke through the palace windows as Thomas stepped into his new position. He was a royal guard now. This was the proudest moment of his life. For 10 years, he had trained hard for this job. Today, he stood in the grand corridor of the palace, wearing the official uniform with shiny buttons and a straight posture. Everything was perfect. Everything was exactly as he had dreamed. Thomas was 28 years old. He came from a simple family. His father was a factory worker. His mother cleaned houses for rich families. They had never owned much money, but they taught Thomas to be honest and strong. When Thomas joined the military academy, his mother cried happy tears. When he passed every test and was selected for the Royal Guard, his father hugged him so tight he could not breathe. This job meant everything to his family. The palace was bigger than Thomas had imagined, even though he had studied the building for months. Tall ceilings stretched above him. Gold decorations covered the walls. Paintings of old kings and queens looked down at him from everywhere. The floor was so clean that Thomas could see his face reflected in it. Everything was quiet and serious and important. His supervisor, Colonel Harrison, was an older man with gray hair and cold eyes. He had been a royal guard for 35 years. He knew every secret of the palace. He knew every rule. He walked with Thomas through the long corridors and showed him his duties. Thomas listened carefully to every word. He wrote nothing down. He only listened and remembered. "You will stand here," Colonel Harrison said, pointing to a spot near the main staircase, "from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. You do not talk. You do not sit. You do not show emotion on your face. You watch everything. You see everything. But nobody should know that you are watching. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," Thomas answered. His voice was quiet and steady. "Good," Colonel Harrison said. "The royal family depends on us. We are their protection. We are the wall between them and the world. Never forget this responsibility." Thomas nodded. He understood. This was serious work. This was important work. The first morning came quickly. Thomas put on his uniform in the dark, before the sun rose. He looked at himself in the mirror. The man looking back was not the same Thomas who worked construction jobs and earned small money. This Thomas was important. This Thomas stood straight. This Thomas had purpose. He arrived at the palace early. The corridors were empty and cold. His footsteps made noise on the marble floor. He walked to his position near the main staircase and stood very still. He kept his hands at his sides. He kept his eyes forward. He breathed slowly. At 7 o'clock, the palace began to wake up. Workers arrived to clean and prepare. Kitchen staff rushed to the back of the palace. Other guards took their positions. Everything moved like a machine that had been running for hundreds of years. At 8 o'clock, Thomas heard something different. A door opened upstairs. Footsteps came down the staircase. Thomas did not move his head, but his eyes moved to see who was coming. It was Princess Charlotte. Thomas had seen pictures of her in newspapers. She was 25 years old. She wore expensive clothes and attended important events. But in the pictures, her smile looked fake. Her face looked tired. In the pictures, she looked like she wanted to be somewhere else. But now, seeing her in person, Thomas noticed something else. Princess Charlotte looked sad. She came down the staircase very slowly. She wore a light blue dress. Her hair was long and brown, but her eyes were not happy. They looked like the eyes of someone who had lost something very important. She was beautiful, but her beauty looked like it was made of glass, something that could break very easily. A servant girl was walking behind her, carrying her breakfast on a silver plate. The servant girl was young, maybe 16 years old. She looked nervous. "Good morning, ma'am," the servant girl said quietly. "I brought your breakfast. Cook made your favorite tea this morning." Princess Charlotte turned to look at the girl. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she asked, "What is your name?" The servant girl looked surprised. "My name is Mary, ma'am." "Mary," Princess Charlotte said. "How long have you worked here?" "2 months, ma'am," Mary answered. Her voice was very quiet. "And do you like this work?" Princess Charlotte asked. Mary did not know what to answer. Nobody had ever asked her if she liked her work. She was a servant. Her opinion did not matter. That was how servants lived. "It is okay, ma'am," Mary said finally. "I am glad to have work." Princess Charlotte smiled then. It was the first real smile Thomas had seen on her face. It was not the fake smile from the newspaper pictures. This smile was real. This smile was kind. "You are doing very good work, Mary," Princess Charlotte said. "The tea smells wonderful. Thank you for bringing it." Mary's face became red. Nobody had ever thanked her before. She walked quickly away, holding the silver plate. Thomas watched all of this. He was not supposed to watch. He was supposed to be invisible. But he could not stop watching. Princess Charlotte stood at the bottom of the staircase. She looked at the morning light coming through the big windows. She looked at the gold decorations on the walls. She looked at the paintings of old kings and queens. Then she looked sad again. She picked up her teacup from the table. The cup was made of fine white pottery. It probably cost more money than Thomas made in 1 year. But when she held the cup, her hands were shaking. "Good morning," she said suddenly, looking directly at Thomas. Thomas was shocked. Guards were supposed to be invisible. They were not supposed to be noticed. But Princess Charlotte had noticed him. "Good morning, ma'am," Thomas said. His voice was professional and quiet. "You are new," she said. It was not a question. It was something she already knew. "Yes, ma'am," Thomas said. "This is my first day." Princess Charlotte looked at him for a long moment. Then she asked, "Are you happy doing this work?" Thomas was surprised by the question. It was the same question she had asked Mary the servant. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I am very happy." Princess Charlotte smiled again, the same real smile. "Good," she said. "That is important. People should be happy in their work." She turned and walked away, carrying her teacup. Thomas watched her go. Something had happened. Something small but important. Princess Charlotte had noticed him. She had spoken to him like he was a real person. Thomas did not know that this small moment was the beginning of something big.
Colonel Harrison had been a royal guard for 30 years. He had protected 3 kings and 2 queens. He knew every corridor of the palace, every secret passage, every hidden room. He knew the schedules of every staff member. He knew which courtiers were honest and which ones smiled while holding knives behind their backs. But nothing in those 30 years had prepared him for Princess Charlotte or for what protecting her would teach him. The other guards were different from Harrison. They were younger, mostly in their 20s and 30s. They had joined the service because it was a job, a good one with decent pay and interesting work. They wore their uniforms proudly, stood in their positions perfectly, and followed rules without question. That was what they thought royal protection meant. Standing still, watching, following orders. They didn't understand that protecting someone was much more complicated than that. James, a guard who was only 25 years old, was the first to truly see the difference. He was stationed outside the dining room one evening when he heard shouting. The king was angry about something, his voice loud and harsh. The queen was defending herself. Prince Thomas was silent, and Princess Charlotte was crying. James's training told him to stay in position, to not move, to pretend he heard nothing. But his heart told him something else was wrong. After the family left the room, Charlotte came out alone. Her eyes were red. Her hands were shaking. She walked toward her bedroom, but she stopped when she saw James. Most royalty walked past guards like they were furniture, invisible and unimportant. Charlotte stopped. She looked at him. She saw him. "Are you okay?" she asked him. James didn't know what to say. A princess was asking about his feelings. That was not how things worked. "I am fine, Your Highness." "How are you?" he asked carefully. Charlotte smiled sadly. "I heard you standing out here." I heard the noise from the dining room. You must have heard us fighting. That's not what I want the people around me to experience. I am sorry." She walked away before James could respond. James stood in that hallway for a long time. Nobody had ever apologized to him before. Nobody had ever considered his experience. He realized something important that night. Princess Charlotte understood that guards were human beings, not just uniforms and weapons. News of this small moment spread among the guards. They began to notice things differently. When Charlotte walked past them, she didn't just nod. She made eye contact. She remembered names. She asked about their families. Guard Marcus told her that his daughter was learning piano. And the next week, Charlotte left a beautiful book about famous piano players on a table where he would find it anonymously. Guard Peter mentioned that his mother was sick, and suddenly the palace doctor was visiting Peter's home, paid for by someone who wanted help but never wanted credit. The guards started comparing notes during their shifts. They shared stories about Charlotte's kindness. Young guards, the ones who had almost quit because they thought palace work was boring and meaningless, suddenly understood why they were here. They weren't just protecting a person. They were protecting someone who saw them, who valued them, who believed their lives mattered. But not everyone approved. The head of palace security, a severe man named Director Blackwell, did not like this change. He believed in strict rules, distance, and formality. When he discovered that guards were receiving gifts from the princess, he was furious. He called a meeting and told them it was inappropriate, unprofessional, and against regulations. The guards were not supposed to accept anything from the royal family. They were not supposed to share personal information. They were not supposed to develop relationships. "You are here to serve," Blackwell said coldly, "not to be friends. Maintain distance. That is how professionals behave." The guards listened silently, but something had changed inside them. They understood now that Director Blackwell's way of thinking was exactly why the world felt cold and disconnected. Charlotte had shown them a better way. That night, something dangerous happened. A man somehow made it past the outer security and entered the palace grounds. He was mentally unstable and carried a weapon. He was shouting about his grievances against the royal family. The alarm went off. Guards rushed to protect the royal family. This was the moment that years of training prepared them for. Charlotte was in the library reading when the alarm sounded. James rushed in and told her to come with him immediately. They needed to get her to the safe room, the protected underground room where the family waited during emergencies. But as James tried to move her, shots rang out from another part of the palace. The man with the weapon was moving through the halls. James grabbed Charlotte and pulled her behind a heavy bookcase. He covered her body with his own, his hand on his weapon, his eyes scanning the doorway. Charlotte was terrified. James was terrified. But as they waited in that darkness, crouching behind old books and wooden furniture, Charlotte whispered to James. "You are a good man," she said quietly. "Whatever happens, I want you to know that you matter. Your life has value. You are not just a guard. You are a human being, and you are important." James didn't respond. He couldn't. Tears were in his eyes, but he had to stay focused, had to keep her safe. The other guards arrived within seconds. They found the man and stopped him. Nobody was badly hurt. The emergency was over in minutes. But everything had changed again. Later, after the danger had passed and things returned to normal, Director Blackwell tried to discipline the guards. He said they had acted too emotionally, that they should follow strict protocol, that their personal feelings for Princess Charlotte had affected their judgment. But the king himself intervened. He watched the security footage. He saw James protecting his daughter, not just with his body, but with his entire being. He saw the guards working together with perfect coordination and genuine care. He realized that his daughter had discovered something important, that people protect those they care about more fiercely than those they serve out of obligation. The guards had learned something too. They understood that their job wasn't just about weapons and procedures. It was about being part of community, about seeing people, about being willing to give everything for someone you respect and love. From that day forward, the palace was different. The guards smiled more. They spoke with the staff. They felt like they were part of something meaningful. And they all understood that it was Princess Charlotte who had taught them the true meaning of protection and service. 3 months after the security incident, the palace prepared for its most important event of the year, the Royal Charity Ball. But she did not drop the idea. That evening, she spoke to her father, the king. The king listened to his daughter explain her thinking. He heard about Elena and her daughter's recovery. He heard about Marcus and Peter, and all the other guards who had learned to see their work as meaningful because Charlotte treated them with respect. The king was quiet for a long time. "Charlotte," he said finally, "you are asking me to break tradition? The nobility will be insulted if staff members attend." "Then they can be insulted," Charlotte replied. "But it is time for something new." The king made a decision that surprised everyone. He approved Charlotte's request. The staff would be invited to the ball. Director Blackwell was furious. He told everyone that this was a disaster, that the event would be ruined, that tradition would be destroyed. He said that Charlotte was too young to understand how the world worked. But the king had made his decision, and Blackwell had to follow it, even though he disagreed completely. The guard heard about this decision, and they became divided. Some were excited. Others were nervous. What would it mean to celebrate alongside the princess instead of just protecting her? What would happen when tradition broke? Colonel Harrison spoke to young James about this change. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "Yes," James admitted. "I do not understand how to be a guard at a celebration. I do not understand how to be equal to the royal family. I have never been taught how to do that." This was not a simple party. This was history. Kings and queens, presidents and prime ministers, wealthy business people and famous celebrities would come to the palace to celebrate together. It was supposed to show the world that the royal family was powerful, sophisticated, and untouchable. Everything had to be perfect. Director Blackwell was in charge of planning the security for this massive event. He created strict rules about who could come, where they could go, and what they could do. No staff members could be seen. All servants would work in hidden areas. Guards would wear formal uniforms and stand in shadows. The event would be a beautiful show, carefully controlled, with nothing unexpected happening anywhere. Charlotte read the plans and became quiet. She asked to meet with Director Blackwell privately. Colonel Harrison watched her walk toward his office, and he knew something would happen. Charlotte had learned to question things, to push back when she disagreed. She was no longer the silent princess who followed all rules. "Director Blackwell," Charlotte said calmly, "I have a request about the ball." Blackwell looked up from his papers. "Your Highness, I want the palace staff to be visible at the ball. I want them to be part of the celebration, not hidden away like they are something to be ashamed of. Elena, from the laundry room, should be invited to attend. Marcus and his wife should attend. All the people who work here every single day should be there." Blackwell's face became red. "That is impossible, Your Highness. The ball is for important people. It is for dignitaries and wealthy guests. Staff cannot attend. It would be unprofessional. It would confuse the social order." Charlotte stood very still. Why would it be confusing? These people are important. They work harder than anyone at this palace. Why should they be hidden? "Because that is not how things are done," Blackwell said firmly. "Because for centuries, the royal family has maintained distance from staff. Because tradition demands it." Charlotte left his office without another word. "Neither have I," Harrison said. "But Princess Charlotte is teaching us that we are already equal. We are already people. The uniform does not change that." The night of the ball arrived. The palace looked magical. Lights decorated the gardens. Music filled the air. Hundreds of important people arrived wearing expensive clothes and jewelry. But something was different this year. Elena walked in wearing a beautiful dress. She looked nervous and uncomfortable, but she also looked proud. Her daughter, the girl whose surgery Charlotte had paid for, came with her. Marcus and his wife attended. Peter came with his mother, who was recovering and growing stronger. The kitchen staff, the cleaning people, the maintenance workers, everyone who made the palace function came to the ball. Some of the wealthy guests were shocked. They did not expect to see servants at a royal celebration. Some ignored the staff completely, as if they were still invisible. But many guests were curious. They began talking to Elena and Marcus and the other staff members. They learned stories about working in the palace, about serving the royal family, about lives completely different from their own wealthy lives. And something surprising happened. The ball became more real, more alive, more interesting. The wealthy guests discovered that the stories of ordinary people were often more interesting than the stories of other wealthy people. A businessman learned that Marcus had served in the military with honor. A famous actress learned that Elena had a gift for sewing and had once dreamed of becoming a designer. A politician learned that Peter's mother had been a teacher before she worked at the palace. The evening transformed into something genuine. It was no longer a perfect show where everyone pretended to be what society expected them to be. It became a celebration where different worlds came together and discovered that they shared the same hopes and fears. Director Blackwell stood in a corner, angry and uncomfortable. But even he could see that nothing had been ruined. If anything, the ball was the most successful one the palace had ever held. People talked about it for months afterward. They did not talk about how beautifully decorated it was or how expensive it had been. They talked about the conversations they had, the people they had met, and how the evening had changed their thinking. Charlotte danced with her father that night. As they moved across the floor, the king looked at his daughter with pride and sadness. Pride because she had the courage to challenge tradition. Sadness because he understood that his daughter was right and that he had not seen this truth before. "You are changing the world," he told her. "I am just trying to change the palace," Charlotte replied. "But maybe that is where the world begins." The guards watched Princess Charlotte dance, and they understood that she had done something important. She had shown that tradition and kindness did not have to be enemies, that you could honor the past while creating a better future, that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was simply see people and treat them with respect. Director Blackwell would never fully understand this lesson, but the other guards and the king and the staff members who had been invited to the ball, they all understood. Everything was different now, and everything would continue to change. The weeks after the ball were not peaceful. Change is never simple, and the palace was learning this lesson the hard way. The wealthy and powerful guests who had attended the celebration began to speak about what they had seen. Some spoke positively about the king's modern thinking. Others were angry. They felt that the royal family was destroying tradition, breaking the rules that had protected their power for centuries. Newspapers printed articles questioning whether Princess Charlotte was too radical, too young, too dangerous to be part of the royal line. Critics said that letting staff members attend formal events was confusing social order. They warned that if the palace continued this way, soon there would be no difference between servants and nobility. Some powerful people began to pressure the king, suggesting that he should remove Charlotte from public life until she learned to behave properly. The king wavered. He was strong, but he was also practical. He understood that the royal family needed support from powerful people to survive. Director Blackwell used this moment to push his agenda. He created reports saying that Charlotte's behavior was dangerous to the institution of the monarchy itself. He suggested that the guards who supported her were not professional enough to continue their work. Colonel Harrison was called into a private meeting. "Your assignment protecting the princess is ending," Blackwell told him coldly. "You have become too close to her. You have forgotten your duty. New guards will take your position. Guards who understand what it means to maintain proper distance and discipline." Harrison was devastated. He had been protecting Charlotte for over a year now. He had learned more about life from her than he had learned in all his previous years of service. But orders were orders. He accepted his dismissal without argument. The news spread quickly through the palace. The guard were confused and heartbroken. Young James, who had held Charlotte during the security incident, felt like something precious was being taken away. If Director Blackwell could remove Harrison, he could remove any of them. The old way of thinking was fighting back, trying to crush the new way before it could take root. Charlotte learned about Harrison's dismissal from Elena, who had heard it from another staff member. She asked to speak with her father immediately. This time, the king refused to see her. He was tired of fighting, tired of defending his daughter's choices. He told his secretary to tell Charlotte that he could not meet with her today. For the first time, Charlotte understood something important. Kindness and goodness were not always enough. You could do the right thing, but if powerful people decided to destroy what you had built, it could be destroyed. She felt despair in a way she had never experienced before. That night, something unexpected happened. The entire guard unit requested a meeting with the king. Colonel Harrison did not request it. The younger guards did. James, Peter, Marcus, and 15 other guards, all in uniform, asked for an audience with the king. The king was surprised. Guards did not make requests like this. Guards followed orders. They did not challenge authority. He agreed to the meeting, mostly because he was curious about what they would say. The guards stood in a line before the king. James spoke first, his voice shaking but steady. "Your Majesty, we are here because we want to tell you what we have learned from serving Princess Charlotte. We came to this job thinking it was just work. We thought we would stand in hallways and be invisible. But the princess taught us that our lives matter. She taught us that seeing people, treating people with respect, this is what makes a person strong, not traditions that divide us." Peter spoke next. "My mother was sick. She thought her life was finished. The princess saved her, not with money. Well, yes, with money, but more importantly with care and attention. My mother now knows that she matters. She is learning to design clothes. She has hope again. This is what the princess gave us." One by one, the guards spoke. They talked about what Charlotte had taught them. They talked about how their work had changed from being a burden to being meaningful. They talked about how they had learned to see other people. They talked about how the palace had become a better place because of one young woman's refusal to accept that tradition was more important than kindness. The king listened to every word. When the guards finished, the room was completely silent. "Your Majesty," Harrison said, stepping forward, "I accept that I have been removed from service. I understand that I am no longer needed. But I want you to know that serving the princess has been the most important work of my life. Whatever happens to me, I am grateful." The king looked at these men, these ordinary people in uniform, and he saw something he had not seen before. He saw his daughter's goodness reflected in their faces, in their words, in their courage to stand before him and speak truth. He understood that his daughter was not dangerous to the monarchy. She was its future. The king made a decision that shocked everyone. He reinstated Colonel Harrison immediately. More than that, he announced a new policy. All palace guards would receive better pay, better benefits, and more respect. They would be seen as part of the royal family, not as servants below the family. He dismissed Director Blackwell, effective immediately. Blackwell's replacement would be chosen from among the guards, someone who understood the new values that the palace was embracing. News of this decision spread quickly through the palace and into the city. People debated what it meant. Some were angry, some were inspired. But most importantly, they were talking about a new possibility, a world where power and kindness could exist together, where tradition could change, where people could be valued equally. That evening, Charlotte waited in the palace garden. Colonel Harrison found her there, standing among the flowers where it had all begun. She turned when she heard him approach. "I heard what you did," she said. "You and the other guards. You spoke for me when I could not speak for myself." "No, Your Highness," Harrison replied. "We spoke for ourselves. We spoke about what you taught us. You showed us that our lives matter. That was the real gift." Charlotte smiled, but there were tears in her eyes. "I was afraid today. I thought I had failed. I thought that kindness could not survive when powerful people fought against it." "It cannot survive alone," Harrison said, "but it survives when good people stand together. You taught us to stand together. Now we are teaching the palace the same thing." They stood in the garden as the sun set, watching the light change from gold to orange to deep red. The palace would never be the same again, and everyone who worked there, from the king to the newest guard, was beginning to understand that sometimes the most powerful revolution is simply choosing to see people and treat them with respect. 1 year had passed since that evening in the palace garden, when Colonel Harrison and Princess Charlotte stood together watching the sunset. The palace was completely different now, though the buildings themselves had not changed. The walls were the same stone, the ceilings were the same height, the corridors were the same length, but everything else had transformed. The most obvious change was in the people. Staff members walked through the halls with their heads held high. They wore small pins on their uniforms that showed They were part of the palace team, not invisible workers hidden in shadows. They ate in the same dining room as the guards. They attended staff celebrations where the royal family joined them, not as distant rulers, but as neighbors and friends. Elena, the laundry woman whose daughter had been saved by Charlotte, now managed an entire department of workers. She had discovered that she had a gift for organizing people and making them feel valued. Her daughter had started a sewing academy in the palace, teaching anyone who wanted to learn. What had once been a simple job in the laundry room had become a life of purpose and creation. Marcus, the guard with the piano-playing daughter, had been promoted to training coordinator. He taught the new guards not just about security procedures, but about the principles that Princess Charlotte had taught them. He told them on their first day, "You are not here to be invisible. You are here to be part of something important. The people you protect are human beings, and they deserve your respect. Your job is to see them, to understand them, and to protect their safety and their dignity." Peter's mother had become something remarkable. With Charlotte's support, she had opened a small school in the palace that taught children of staff members. She brought the same care and attention to these young students that she had once given to wealthy children in private schools. The difference was that now she was doing it out of love, not obligation. She was doing it for people who had become her friends. Colonel Harrison had not returned to his old position. Instead, he became the head of palace security, replacing Blackwell with a completely new approach. Under his leadership, guards were trained to think about the people they protected as real human beings with hopes and fears and families. They were taught to notice things not just for security, but for care. If a staff member looked sad, a guard might ask what was wrong and try to help. If someone was struggling, the guards became part of the system of support. The king had changed too. He spent less time in formal meetings and more time walking through the palace, speaking with people, understanding their lives. He learned that the head gardener had once studied architecture but could not afford school. The king helped him pursue his dream. He learned that one of the kitchen workers had a son who wanted to be a musician. The king arranged for music lessons. The king was discovering that his power was most useful when he used it to help people, not to maintain distance from them. But the most important changes were happening outside the palace walls. Newspapers that had criticized Charlotte's radical ideas began to change their stories. Journalists visited the palace and saw something they had not expected: happiness. Workers were genuinely happy. They smiled. They worked with care and dedication, not because they were forced to, but because they believed in what they were doing. One famous journalist wrote, "This palace has discovered something the modern world has forgotten, that people flourish when they are seen valued and respected." Other palaces in other countries began to ask how the king had made these changes. Other wealthy families wondered if they should treat their workers differently. Slowly, very slowly, the idea began to spread that perhaps power was not about control and distance. Perhaps power was about building community and respect. Charlotte herself had not become more famous or more important in title. She was still a princess. But she had become something else too, a symbol. Young people around the world heard her story and began to question their own traditions. They asked why their schools maintained strict hierarchies. They asked why their workplaces treated some people as more important than others. They asked why their families kept secrets instead of talking honestly with each other. One day, Charlotte stood in the palace library reading letters. Hundreds and hundreds of letters came to her every week from people around the world. A teacher in Japan wrote that she had started treating her janitors with respect, and her entire school had become a happier place. A businessman in America wrote that he had invited his cleaning staff to his company meetings, and the ideas from these ordinary people had transformed his business. A mother in India wrote that she had stopped treating her household workers as invisible and had discovered they were friends. Charlotte felt the weight of these letters, the responsibility of knowing that her actions had rippled out into the world and changed so many lives. But she also felt hope. She understood that change was possible, that goodness could matter, that seeing people, truly seeing them, could transform everything. That evening, she walked to the garden where everything had begun. Colonel Harrison was there, as he often was, walking to the flowers and thinking about life. They had become true friends, the princess and the old guard. Age and title meant nothing between them now. I received a letter today from a girl in Africa, Charlotte told him. She said that your story, our story, gave her courage to stand up to injustice in her community. She started a program to help street children. She said it was because she believed in what we had done here. Harrison looked at the young princess with pride and wonder. That was not because of us, Your Highness. That was because you showed the world that one person who truly cares can change everything. You showed people that it is possible. We did it together, Charlotte said. I could not have done it alone. You and Marcus and Peter and James and Elena and all the others. Every person who chose to see each other, to respect each other, to care about each other. That is what created this change. The sun was setting again, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, just like it had 1 year ago. But this time they were not alone. Young James walked by with his wife, who had been a kitchen worker when they first met. Marcus and his daughter passed them, talking about a concert she would perform at. Elena was in the garden with her daughter, now teaching sewing to a group of young people who wanted to learn. Peter and his mother sat on a bench, watching the sunset together. The palace had become a place where ordinary people and royalty lived together, not as masters and servants, but as human beings trying to build something better. It was not perfect. Problems still existed, but something fundamental had changed. People now looked at each other and saw a value. They saw a purpose. They saw a possibility. Charlotte turned to Colonel Harrison and smiled. Do you think this will last? Do you think the world will remember this? I think, Harrison said slowly, that as long as there are people who choose kindness over tradition, who choose to see people over rules, this will last. The palace has shown that another way is possible. Now it is up to the rest of the world to decide if they want to follow. As darkness fell on the palace gardens, lights came on throughout the building, not the distant, formal lights of power and control, but warm lights that showed people together, working, laughing, caring. The palace that had once been a place of secrets and distance had become a place of connection and hope. And it had all begun with one young princess who simply decided to notice the people that everyone else had learned to ignore.